Welcome back, everybody, Coast to Coast. This Week in America. Right in the middle but left out is the first book from Jeffery. The central theme deals with how to identify and deal with the realities of incest. Jeffery considers himself a blessed man. He's been an entertainer, professional singer, guitar player, composer, actor. He was called into the United Methodist Ministry, where he has served for a number of years. He was a hospice chaplain. Along with his wife, an occupational therapist with a doctorate in adult education, they do counseling, mentoring, encouraging others in the depths of life. Jeffery is currently working on a second book, Can You Love Someone You Can't Stand? I'm looking forward to getting a copy of that. The author of Right in the Middle but Left Out, Jeffery, joining us on This Week in America. Reverend Trees, welcome to the program. It's great to have you with us.
Well, thank you. It's great to be with you.
It's such an interesting book, a needed book, and you talk about yourself in the beginning, and you use the old Paul Simon line, "I'm still crazy after all these years." That pretty well sums it up, doesn't it?
Oh, yes. I love Paul Simon.
Oh, yes, and I loved it, starting with that and reading your background in the beginning, because we look at the ministry part of it and think, oh, this guy probably doesn't have the problems the rest of us do. You say very honestly, you are a flawed person. You go through life issues just like the rest of us do.
Oh, you better believe it. We're all human. Doesn't make any difference whether we announce our faith or don't announce our faith. We still have issues.
Well, and you talk in the beginning about through Christ that you can forgive yourself, actually love yourself. How long did it take to get to that place where you were comfortable with that realization?
Well, I tell you, it's something you wrestle with on a daily basis. It's something I go through. I'm still a sinner in need of Christ's forgiveness, and once I recognize the fact that Christ died for me, and then I can relax and be myself. That's part of the reason why so much of the book may be centered on me, because I had to redefine who I was.
Well, in the book the book is called Right in the Middle but Left Out. I want to ask you about the title of that. One of the chapters is What in the Name of God is Happening, and you incorporate the title into that. Talk about the title, how you came up with that, because you found yourself right in the middle, but you felt left out of a number of these issues that you had to deal with.
Oh, yeah, quite a bit. With my marriage, it was really, really tough. My wife just stopped communicating completely, and it made it very difficult. And what happened was I went to the Holy Land, came back from the Holy Land 2 weeks later, and she was a completely different person than what she was when I left. And the only thing she could say to me was, it's not your problem, it's mine. I'll tell you when I can.
Well, and it took a while to get to that point. When it was later when she called you and tells you that she was just diagnosed with thyroid cancer, you're thinking this is treatable, but she had to tell you something else at that point, which brought all of the rest of this into perspective then.
Definitely. Yeah, it was 9 months later, and it really threw me off. But when I got the phone call, I was at another church and listening to the bishop talk and having a good time, and then just all of a sudden, I get this phone call and they take me out. I go and listen to what she has to say, and my heart just kind of dropped. I didn't know what to think or what to say particularly, other than this is good news, because cancer of the thyroid is not bad for a woman. It's more dangerous for a man than it is for a woman. And but she just didn't respond too much to that. And then she told me about being chased around the dinner table by her father with a butcher knife, threatening to kill her by slicing her throat. And that's the slicing of the throat thread that put her in such a deep state of, I guess, depression. I really can't speak on her behalf, but she's a wonderful person, but I just can't imagine to go through what she went through.
Well, and that's something that you talk about. And the name of the book, again, is Right in the Middle but Left Out. The author is Reverend Jeffery Trees, our guest on This Week in America. The book's available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, at bookventure.com, and the bookstore as well. And you can link on directly by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Talk about the fact that it's not uncommon for someone who's an incest victim to silently carry this with them, try to deal with it for many years in their life. It's something they carry with them basically through all their adult life.
Oh, yes. Matter of fact, I just had my 50th high school reunion, and one of the women came up to me and said, I've been married for 44 years, and now I'm divorced. He couldn't deal with it. And I just, wow. I knew where he was coming from, but it still hurts.
Well, and that's one thing that you point out, and I believe one of the reasons you wrote the book. There are a number of books, and you talk about that, self-help books, that if you're a victim, you can at least attempt to get some help. If you're a family member, there really aren't a lot of books out there to get you through this, are there?
No, there isn't. The best one we had was, and this is quite a while ago, but it was Ghosts in the Bedroom. And it was well written. It was very instructional. It was done by a social worker, but he had no faith. And so there weren't the boundaries of safety and concern that I would have as a pastor. And so, when we went through this, it was just sort of like, well, it's all right for him to say, well, your wife needs to have permission to, have an affair, or permission to experience homosexuality, or permission to do this and do that. And all of a sudden it was back in my face, trying to say, well, wait a minute, I didn't know I had to deal with all these things.
Well, and you talk very honestly about you were full of rage yourself, and you didn't know how to handle. How did you get to the point where you were able at least to put this in some type of perspective?
Well, I will give a great deal of credit to Dr. Ken Reed. He was the psychologist that I worked with. He was a psychologist for the South and North Indiana Conference of the United Methodist Church, and a very, very good friend of mine. But I went to him for counseling, and I just said, I just don't know what to do. And he says, well, why don't you start a group of men who have wives who have been molested as small children? I says, there can't be that many. He says, oh, you'd be surprised. Try it. So we put he kind of put a hook out there to get some people to come in and get involved. And by golly, there were 6 of us, which was perfect size for the group. And we had a counselor that led us. And because I was not going to be the one who would do the leading, because I needed healing myself.
Yes.
And so it was probably the greatest thing I ever did for myself. Sitting there and listening to what we all were going through was like listening to ourselves talk, because they were so similar in terms of reactions and situations and things that came up, and different ways you touched a person or didn't touch a person, or grabbed them and hugged them, and they didn't want to be grabbed and hugged, and it was just bouncing off the wall for all of us.
One of the chapters in the book is entitled, How Do We Live With This? Talk a little bit about that, and I'm sure answers vary from person to person.
Oh, definitely. It's not an easy thing to live with, because it's so taboo to talk about. And that's what I found out. Didn't make any difference whether it was, a multi-million-dollar business out there someplace, or whether it was the United Methodist Church or any other denomination as far as that goes. Nobody really wanted to talk about incest. And so, you didn't know what to think. And was your thinking proper? Was it right? Was it true? Was it honest? How were you going to deal with this in so many different categories? And so we talked and talked and talked through our small group, and we went around everything. But we had to make sure that we didn't interrupt one another. We had to make certain that there were certain parameters that we would always support. Never allow any of the information to get out. While we were in counseling or anything along those lines, and that we were to be, become friends, basically. And we did. We all became friends. And we all dealt with it differently in terms of how we had to deal with our situation, depending on what the situation was that our spouse came out of.
The book we're talking about is called Right in the Middle, but Left Out. The author is Jeffery Trees. I'm sorry, I cut you off as you were finishing there, because that's so important, because I'm sure there are people that are either dealing with this or know someone that's dealing with this and would like to be there for guidance of some kind, and they really don't know what to do.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. And that's the biggest disappointment I think I had about going through the whole process, was nobody knew anything about what to do. And painful. You talk about pain, that goes clear down through the soul. And I just wanted to be able to somehow get something out of this that was worthwhile. Now, I will still say this day, my ex-wife is still worthwhile. She's still the mother of my children. She's a good person. And I can call her. I can talk to her.
Yes.
But at the same time, this was such a divide that came between us. We couldn't talk. It wasn't there wasn't an avenue where you were allowed to talk about such issues.
Well, and that's interesting, because I'm thinking as you're talking, this is not the situation that all of a sudden a spouse says, I've been a victim of incest, a victim of molestation. You accept it, she feels better, she got it off her chest, and life goes on. You have to deal with this and try to make some sense out of it. She now is still dealing with it, and now she knows that she has to be there for you as you are dealing with it. Talk about that marriage dynamic that suddenly, when both of them, both people involved, have to deal with this issue.
Well, in my case, my wife just shut down emotionally. And it was very hard to see and to watch. She withdrew from everybody. And most situations, and she kept working, but she worked with guys who were basically coming on to her, sexually. And that didn't sit well with me. So we couldn't talk about that very easily.
Yes.
I couldn't assume anything about what she was thinking or feeling or anything along those lines. She had a tendency to, pick at her face until it was almost raw, and you just know that a lot of that was just trying to get the ugliness of what happened to her out of her. And God bless her. I wish I could have grabbed it and pulled it out myself.
Well, you said that in the book, and the book is Right in the Middle but Left Out. The author is Jeffery Trees, our guest on This Week in America. Information by going directly to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and you can link on to get information on the book. The book's available at Amazon, available at Bookventure as well. You said you soon discovered when dealing with sexual abuse issues, the best to throw reasoning out the window and duck the emotions once they get started.
Yeah.
Interesting, because you're thinking a rational mind, especially someone in a position of counseling as you were, you'd have all the answers and be able to fit this together, and you're saying not necessarily working that way.
Well, that's exactly right, because, you even find within the church, as you're dealing with people in the church and deal with issues that are very, very emotional to people, their emotions will win out over any reasoning of which you can send out there. And so I already knew that, but I didn't know it in personal relationships like that. Especially between a husband and wife. That was a tough part for me because I'm one of these people that will sit down and I will try to reason everything out and go through it, and I kind of take as my ex-wife would say, I took the direction of being, kind of, too reasonable in going through everything that I was filtering everything through. And so I was too intellectual in filtering through it instead of what's the baseline emotion that was raw and just horrible.
Well, it's interesting to follow through as this whole situation evolves and your reactions and trying to make sense of all of this. And you say in writing the book, basically, if it helps one person, then that was your intention. The book's out there. You've been in the groups. What kind of impact do you think the book is having?
Well, as I talk to different people, I've had people come up to me, and especially women, who come up to me and say, "I know you understand," and that's all they have to say. Then I'll have men who will come and go, "I didn't know there was such a thing. What in the world is going on?" And then I have, as I've talked to church leaders, they haven't the slightest clue as to what to do. They haven't been taught what to do, how to react to situations like these. And so there is no reaction. And so it does put you in the middle, because you're right in the middle between everybody, but you're left out because they don't give you any answers.
You describe it as a tidal wave of incest, and in reading the book, right in the middle but left out. That pretty well sums it up, because it does have an impact, the same impact as a tidal wave, doesn't it? It's all consuming.
Oh, it is. Just completely consuming. Probably the darkest time of my life. Going through that with her, and still think about it to this day.
Once you try to make sense of it yourself, along with the spouse, you've got a chapter that's incredibly important, a special message for children. A couple minutes left in the program. Talk about that, because at some point, children know what's going on. They sense something going on in the family. What's the best way to approach that with children and, in some cases, grandchildren?
Oh, yes, definitely. You have to be honest. And unfortunately, when something is taboo, it's hard to be honest.
Exactly.
And so your honesty has to come out, and you've got to be able to sit down and be willing to sit down with children and let them know they're not at fault. They're not the problem. Abusers have the tendency to always say to the abused, "You tell anybody and I'll kill you," or "I'll do something that's going to be even worse. I'll hurt your brother or your sister or whatever." And so they carry that guilt around with them all the time. And so, children have to understand, the world doesn't revolve around just their own feelings, but that their feelings can get swallowed up by issues that happen around us. And if they can begin to separate that out, then they can start dealing with it a lot better than just saying, "Well, I'm going to take Mom's side, I'm going to take Dad's side, I'm going to take," whose side do I take?
Right.
And and unfortunately, whenever you have a situation where you can't communicate with your spouse, everybody says, "Well, I take so-and-so's side." And it's not a matter of taking sides. It's a matter of understanding the pain, the hurt, the embarrassment, the agony of which, they go through, and so does everybody that loves them goes through.
We sense those emotions in the book right in the middle but left out. A very important book. Our guest is the author, Jeffery Trees, Trees. The book's available at Amazon. You'll find it at bookventure.com in the bookstore. You can link on directly to those sites by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Reverend Trees, it's been a fascinating discussion. Thank you so much for being with us on the program. You mentioned a few minutes ago honesty. I think that's what makes this book so important, is you were very honest about sharing all the emotions that you went through in a very personal way. Gives us all a better understanding in dealing with a situation like this.
And they weren't all good emotions.
Exactly. And again, as you pointed out in the beginning, you're flawed like everybody else, and it's like you're relatable because you have the same issues that emotions, good or bad, that all the rest of us have. The book is right in the middle but left out. The next book from Reverend Trees is Can You Love Someone You Can't Stand? Let me know when that comes out, because I'll buy the first copy.
All right.
I am looking forward to that. Reverend Trees, thank you so much for being with us on the program. Once again, the book is right in the middle but left out. Information, of course, at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. And we're back after these messages.